The high-pitched chirping sounds had been going on for 20 minutes, and Caleb was ready to lose his mind. He stood in the station common room, holding a sonic wrench in one hand and a half-eaten sandwich in the other, staring at the ancient brown couch against the far wall. The chirping, desperate, rhythmic, and increasingly frantic, was definitely coming from underneath it. "Please be a broken comm unit," Caleb muttered, setting down his sandwich on the cluttered maintenance table. "Please be literally anything except what I think it is." The chirping intensified, now accompanied by tiny scratching sounds. Caleb approached the couch slowly, the dim yellow lighting of the common room casting long shadows across the worn furniture. He crouched down, peering into the narrow gap between the couch bottom and the floor. Two enormous golden eyes stared back at him from the darkness, reflecting the light like tiny suns. The eyes blinked. The chirping became a pitiful squeak. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." Caleb sat back on his heels, running one hand through his hair. The eyes in the darkness belonged to something small, scaled, and absolutely not supposed to be on a human maintenance level. Caleb pulled out his comm unit, thumbing it on. "Vera? Yeah, it's Caleb. I've got a situation in Common Room 7. You're not going to believe this, but I think there's a..." The door exploded inward with a screech of tortured metal. Cthulhu, the Zendari ambassador, burst through the doorway, his massive 8-foot reptilian frame barely fitting through the human-sized entrance. His four arms flailed wildly, bronze scales rippling with bioluminescent distress patterns that pulsed red and orange across his body. His vertical slit eyes, all three of them arranged in a triangle pattern on his angular skull, dilated with panic. "My son!" Cthulhu's voice rattled the windows, his forked tongue flickering between rows of crystalline teeth. "Have you seen my son? He is small! He is bronze! He makes noises!" As if on cue, the chirping under the couch reached a new pitch of desperation. Cthulhu's head snapped toward the sound, his neck extending on telescoping vertebrae. All three eyes locked onto the couch. "There," Cthulhu breathed, his body going rigid. Then, at full volume, "Do not move that furniture." Caleb, who had been reaching for the couch, froze. Why not?" "It is a sacred test." Cthulhu's scales shifted to a deep purple, his forearms gesturing dramatically. "When a Zendari youngling becomes trapped, he must free himself. It builds character. It teaches problem solving." The chirping under the couch became absolutely pitiful, joined by what sounded like tiny claws scraping uselessly against the floor. Caleb looked from the couch to Cthulhu and back again. "Your kid sounds really upset." "Yes! Excellent! The distress sharpens the mind." Cthulhu nodded vigorously, his neck vertebrae clicking. "He will emerge stronger, smarter. This is crucial for his development." "How long has he been under there?" Caleb asked slowly. Cthulhu's scales rippled with pride, shifting to a bright orange. 3 hours. A new record. His grandfather was only trapped for 2 hours before he freed himself from a similar 3 hours. Caleb stood up, brushing dust off his maintenance jumpsuit. "He's been stuck under a couch for 3 hours and you just left him there?" "It is tradition!" Cthulhu's voice rose defensively, all four arms crossing over his chest. "Do not interfere with Zendari cultural practices, human." Caleb grabbed the edge of the couch with both hands and lifted. The entire piece of furniture came up easily, human muscles barely straining against the weight. He tilted it backward, revealing the small reptilian cub pressed flat against the wall. The tiny thing couldn't have been more than 2 feet long, with soft bronze scales that hadn't yet hardened, oversized golden eyes that took up half his face, and 4 stubby arms that waved helplessly in the air. The cub looked up at Caleb, chirped once, and immediately scurried behind the human's legs, wrapping his tiny arms around Caleb's ankle. Cthulhu's scales went completely white, his 3 eyes widening to the size of dinner plates. You! You lifted it? You just lifted the furniture?" "Yeah." Caleb looked down at the cub clinging to his leg, still making soft chirping sounds. "It's a couch. It weighs like 80 pounds. 80, Cthulhu's voice strangled off. His scales flickered rapidly through colors green, blue, violet, back to white. "That is impossible. The test requires cunning, strategy, hours of careful planning to leverage the weight distribution and... Or you could just lift it." Caleb gently pried the cub off his ankle. The tiny reptilian immediately transferred his grip to Caleb's arm, scales vibrating with relief purrs. Look, buddy, your kid was scared. He's been crying for 20 minutes straight. That's not building character. That's just mean. Cathorax's scales settled into a deep crimson, his neck retracting back to normal length. The human simply lifted a training obstacle. With brute strength, Cathorax's forearms drooped, his bronze scales rippling with waves of conflicting colors. I cannot believe humans can just lift things. Heavy things. Things that should require machinery. What else can you lift? Catharax asked, his tone taking on dangerous curiosity. The council chamber doors? The diplomatic podium? The door opened, admitting Vera. The station administrator took one look at the scene-tilted couch, traumatized alien, and Caleb with a baby reptilian on his shoulder and sighed deeply. Caleb, what did you do? I lifted a couch. He destroyed a sacred tradition. Catharax wailed, his scales flashing through the entire spectrum. Generations of Zendari younglings have undergone the trial of trapped furniture. And this human just lifted it. Vera pinched the bridge of her nose. Caleb, did you know it was a sacred tradition before you lifted the couch? He was crying for 20 minutes. What was I supposed to do, leave him there? Yes, Catharax shouted, then seemed to reconsider. His scales shifted to shame purple. The cub chirped in agreement with Caleb, nuzzling harder against the human's neck. Perhaps, Catharax said very quietly, his forearms folding in submission. The trial was going on for rather long, and the chirping was getting quite distressed. 3 hours, Vera said flatly. You left your child trapped and crying for 3 hours because of tradition? When you say it like that, it sounds bad. Catharax's scales went pale bronze, matching his son. The cub let out a series of cheerful chirps and started grooming Caleb's hair with tiny clawed hands, scales shimmering with contentment. I cannot process this, Catharax said slowly, sinking down onto his haunches with a defeated air, his bronze scales dulling. Humans have been on this station for 8 months, and we are only now realizing you can just lift things we consider immovable. Maybe consider updating your traditions to include safety limits? Vera suggested. Catharax's scales flushed with shame. He stood, extending all 4 arms toward Caleb. My son, please! Caleb gently detached the chirping cub and handed him over. The tiny reptilian immediately started crying again, reaching back toward Caleb with all 4 stubby arms. Catharax's scales went pale with distress. He will not stop crying now, the ambassador said miserably, his 3 eyes dimming. He has bonded with the human who saved him. This is a disaster. Or, Vera said carefully, you could bring him by occasionally to visit Caleb. Let them build a friendship. Catharax looked at his wailing offspring, then at Caleb, then back at the cub. His scales shifted through several colors before settling on resigned acceptance. Fine. But you must promise never to tell the council that humans can casually lift furniture we consider architectural fixtures. They are already paranoid about your species. Our lips are sealed, Vera assured him. She paused. Wait, architectural fixtures? You built permanent furniture into buildings specifically to trap children? It seemed like a good idea at the time. Catharax's scales flushed orange with defensiveness as he headed for the door. Still holding his crying son, his 4 arms cradling the small form. Many cultures have questionable traditions when examined with outside perspective. Do not judge. The door closed behind him, leaving Caleb and Vera alone in the common room with the tilted couch. So, Vera said after a long moment, you ruined an alien tradition by being helpful. I saved a scared baby from being stuck under a couch for 3 hours. By picking up furniture, they apparently bolt to the floor on their homeworld specifically to make it harder for kids to escape. That's insane. Welcome to interspecies relations. Vera walked over to help Caleb right the couch, both of them easily maneuvering it back into position. Next time, maybe check if there's a cultural reason before you start moving things. Next time, maybe aliens shouldn't leave their kids crying under furniture and call it character building. Vera couldn't quite hide her smile. Fair point. Now get back to work before Catherax files a formal complaint. Caleb picked up his sandwich, took a bite, and headed for the door. Behind him, he could still hear faint chirping sounds echoing down the corridor, a tiny reptilian cub who would probably grow up telling stories about the day a human lifted the impossible couch. All because he'd lifted a couch.